Welcome to the Ask Brien podcast radio show, where you'll hear from some of the most successful founders and CEOs of businesses and startups, sharing their best advice for success and even some stories on how their mistakes actually make them even more successful. Now, here are your hosts, Brien and Traci.
Welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien Show on KHCS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Like no other station in the world! Why do you do that?
Do what?
Is that like a slogan part or something? Like no other station in the world!
I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm really good at doing that impersonation.
So, is it true? Are you going to become the assistant engineer?
I'm my own assistant.
You need an assistant?
No.
Why do you need an assistant?
Why do I need an assistant? You tell me.
Can you go to the bathroom by yourself?
You
need an assistant?
Like every functioning person, yeah.
There's a lot of unfunctioning people.
I mean, yeah. I'm not one of those.
Let's not go into that. So everyone, we're listening to the Ask Brien radio show, and it's spelled ASKBRIEN, and it's not spelled BRIAN or BRYAN, and people are always asking that. So if you've never listened to the show, we're going to tell you. If you've listened to the show, well, too bad. You're going to just hear it again. Now, the engineer that starts with an E, who sometimes is excited and enthusiastic. 3. Okay. And sometimes he even knows what an expert means.
It's 4.
Is going to tell us why we have the E in Ask Brien.
Well, there's a lot of words that have to do with Ask Brien. It's kind of like a theme. You said 4 of them. You said 4. Yes. You said engineer because that's part of it, because that's me. Your engineer.
Well, not if I make
not your assistant. Not your assistant.
If I make you assistant engineer, then we don't need the.
Well, then who is above me then at that point?
Well, that's when we get AI.
That starts with an A and an I. There's no E in that.
Well, just like assistant engineer.
Well, there is an E in assistant engineer. That's the E in engineer.
No, I don't want to spell the.
Oh my god!
I don't want to spell the first 3 letters of assistant either.
Tracy, help me.
Enough. How about E? Enough.
That's a good one. I like that one. That's a good one.
Don't forget about the word fun, Tracy. Okay.
Yeah, and another.
Fun starts with an F.
Yes.
Oh man.
Start having some fun.
We never have fun. We're a very boring show.
Well, either way, there are other words we have. Experts, because everybody is an expert in the field they're choosing here on the Ask Brien Show. Experience, because everybody's very experienced in their field.
What do you mean everybody's an expert? I mean, not
everybody that happens to be on the show is an expert in their field. Except
for you, but okay.
Expert engineer. Hey-o, I'm here.
Well, do you have 5 years experience?
Don't have 5, but I do have 3.
Didn't we say 40 hours a week and come up with that
criteria? On the Ask Brien technicality, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and if he's working in radio, he's more than working 40 hours a week. This we know for sure.
Yep.
I'm not sure how many hours he works a week. What other E's?
Well, we also have. Well, you took away enthusiasm. Actually, there's a couple more coming back, but we actually lost our guest, and he's coming back in. So, want to take it from here while I get him back online?
Absolutely.
All right, sweet.
So, Tracy, do you know what the E's are?
I do know what the E's are, and I'm very excited about today's show because we're going to be talking about something that starts with an E. Explorest. How about that for an E?
Well, that's true, but the biggest E of all, which you didn't use, which was empathy.
Enthusiasm!
No, empathy. Empathy. We already said enthusiasm.
Tracy, I liked your enthusiasm version. I liked that. I really did.
Okay, well, have empathy for me is that you guys are talking so much on this, but I have empathy for Patty every single show. Every single show.
Thank you. I feel it, Tracy. I really do.
Well, you need to empathize. He's got a very, very tough situation. Are there any other E's? Are we missing any?
Well, I was in the process. Yeah, there. Oh, I like that one. Extraordinary. That's a new one.
Oh, that's a new one. We've used that.
That was a new one, from a week or two ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Is Justin here? Do we have Justin?
Yeah. Justin is. Justin is back.
Why would you think he's not here?
Justin is here. Hey, everybody.
Justin's in the house.
In the house.
Well, without any further ado, how do you spell ado?
ADIEU.
See, he's like a trained seal. I do that every week.
I'm sorry, Patty, but that was pretty funny.
Forgive me for my monotonous approach to that.
Justin, do you have any fish so I can throw them to the seal?
Fish? I'm a huge salmon fan.
No, I meant to the engineer. You're a Dolphins fan? What?
You got that right, too, being in Miami.
I would think that. Good luck this year. We know the Bills are going to win that
division. We're crossing fingers.
You better cross your toes. Anyway, we're here, and the engineer is laughing. That begins with an L, not an E. But we have a very, very good guest. His name is Justin Myers. He's got a great company, and we're going to ask him a few questions. And I think you're going to be really, really enthusiastic about our guest, which also has an E in it. So, Justin, give us a little background about your business career before you started this latest company, and then we'll dive right into the company and things that are going on there.
Sure. Well, thank you, everybody, for having me on the show. So I grew up in Michigan and went to the University of Michigan, go Blue, studied philosophy and economics. And then from there, I did management consulting with IBM for about 5 or 6 years across many, many different industries. It was an incredible experience with a lot of smart people, but of course, extremely corporate. And there was a point while at IBM, I was like, okay, it's time for something different. And so I ended up moving out to Vietnam, and I co-founded its first digital bank, also known as a neobank, called Timo. Did that for about 6 or so years. It was actually an epic experience, transitioning from, big blue and corporate to a very much smaller team, entrepreneurial, and just blue ocean skies on where we could take the business. And so about 5, 6 years after launching the bank, I took some of the same investors and brought them into my new business, which is Explorest. And we help our global community discover and experience the world's greatest places by curating insights in our app from world-class photography and travel experts.
Well, a couple of things before we dive into the company. So this bank, it was a regular bank. First of all, Vietnam, of all places, why? What drove you to Vietnam? Great
question. Well, I don't know if any of you have been, but it, for one, is a phenomenal country. And when I was at IBM, I took about I think it was a 4-week December vacation and traveled Southeast Asia. Fell in love with Vietnam, and I also fell in love with a lady who's now my wife. So what ended up happening is I took a year leave of absence from IBM, took a bit of a break, moved out to Vietnam, spent time with her, got to know her world, and also was looking for some side work. And that's how I got introduced to the founding investors who seeded the digital bank.
Now, a digital bank, that's a regular bank? What's the difference between a digital bank, the regular brick and mortar Bank of America, and a Bitcoin or that type of currency bank?
Sure. Yeah. So digital bank, especially at the time, had nothing to do with blockchain or cryptocurrency or anything like that. It was really just doing most things on the internet or on your mobile phone. And in Vietnam, as you would expect, and this was now about 10 years ago, mobile apps were all in their nascent stage, and you had to do anything. You needed to either sit on the phone for hours or you had to go in person to process any sort of banking transaction. And so we built from the ground up a full-fledged service offering for people to do their banking. Kind of our tagline was around lifestyle banking. So how does Timo, the digital bank, kind of accommodate the lifestyle of the Vietnamese? And so at a neobank point, it's interesting. It's actually a really interesting business model. And there's a handful here in the United States. You may recall about also 10 years ago, there's a bank called Simple in the United States. And how these neobanks work is they create entirely the front end facing part of the business. So the customer acquisition, the marketing, they build the technology to do your banking services on the mobile phone. All that stuff's done by this kind of neobank. But they partner with a licensed financial institution, which actually holds the deposits. They're the ones that can, operate a fully fledged bank, generate loans, et cetera, et cetera. So the neobank concept in Vietnam was similar to that model that was built here in the United States. Simple. And it was a great success. And it was a really, really exciting journey for me, as I said before, just transitioning from corporate consulting to, dealing with a tech product.
Well, that is very interesting. And did you end up selling the company, or what happened to that company?
Yeah, so great question. So another partner bank in the country acquired about 50% of the business. And so I think now it's branded under Timo Plus. And yeah, it's still operating, growing every day.
So, Justin, you have this new company. It's called Explorest. How did you come up with that concept? And did you do it alone? And how did it all come about?
Yeah, no, and I love this story. So, and now that I've given you all the context of the digital bank, it's a great transition. So 5 years into the bank, I knew that being in the financial industry is not something that would enthrall me forever and ever. And so, I talked with our shareholders and there was this understanding that I would transition into something else. So I was looking for that next big thing, that next big idea. And so I was in Mexico, Puerto Vallarta, for a very good friend's destination wedding. And we were all amongst friends in a pool, kicking around ideas. And I'm like, hey, so what's everybody experiencing? Is there's some severe pain point that needs to be addressed? Help me kind of ideate this next big business that we can create. And then a buddy of mine, a very dear friend who I've known for about 15 years, his name is Michael Lack. He is a professional photographer. He's focused primarily on automobile clients. He expressed this frustration he had that whenever he's traveling, he spends so much time trying to find the great places to take photos. And before you know it, he's missing sunrise and sunset just because he's wasting so much time researching. Now, it's a clear use case for the photographer. But as me and my buddies were all in the pool, we kind of realized the same thing. When we travel, we're inspired by beautiful images. We want to figure out where these places are too. So this pain point kind of resonates with the content creators like Michael, but also just me who takes photos with my phone and just wants to visit incredibly beautiful places. So we thought we kind of had something there. And as with kicking off any big project, it starts with a small step. So I mobilized a phone call with another partner of ours. And that's really what kind of seeded the beautiful story of Explorest. And if you're listening to this now, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the app on either the Play Store or the App Store, because we have loads of beautiful locations in California that are featured. And if you're anywhere in the nation, we also feature lots of great places there as well.
So how did you start this? I mean, so you come up with this great idea, and this great photographer, but I mean, okay, now what? What's the next step to get something going, to create something?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the lean canvas business model. It's like a one-pager summary of a business opportunity. And so as I recall, I kind of started with that, putting our initial thoughts, giving them some structure on this diagram that helps you identify a business's key value proposition. And then after that, did competitive analysis. So did a bunch of research on different technology products that have tried to solve this problem, whether it be on the mobile phone or just on the internet. And there were a handful. And it's actually funny. After we launched, I couldn't tell you how many people have reached out to us or commented on an ad we were serving. This has been an idea on my mind forever. Finally, somebody has done it. So, I mean, the idea itself isn't that new, but I think how we went about the execution is pretty unique. And so, yeah, between the competitive analysis and seeing that Michael, as a professional photographer, he already had a huge network of other photographers that he knows across the world, actually. So we thought we were in a really kind of defensible, strong position to build something like this.
Well, that's pretty cool. So you start getting these pictures, you start posting them, but how do you figure out, other than being a forum to post pictures, how it's going to monetize? I mean, that was actually one of the problems that they even had with Facebook, even when it went public. Well, there's no revenue here, so I mean, great. And Instagram as well. I don't know much about Instagram's beginnings. I do know Facebook. And, how do you think you're going to make any money out of it? I mean, great. I can post pictures, of my grandmother on the internet. But what does that mean?
Right. Yeah. So monetization, as with any venture, there's a strategy of, don't worry about monetization. Just worry about, acquiring millions and millions of users. But that's not the approach that I've decided to take with Explorest. I always wanted to have a very clear path to monetization. And to explain it, let me give it a bit more context. So when you open Explorest, you're met with a beautiful feed of imagery. And when you tap one of those images, you access what we call a location insight. And it includes everything you'd want to know about how to get to that place and have the best experience, as well as tips to take the best photo. And this information is provided by photography and travel creatives like Michael, and we've got about over 135 now on the platform. So when you open Explorest, you're truly met with the most beautiful images from experts. Now, the first question is, how do we even incentivize creatives like Michael and the others on the community to share this information? They spend all this time and money exploring the world. Why share all this insight about exactly where they take their pictures, the gear that was used, the metadata behind the image, composition tips? It takes a lot of time for them to prepare this information. And so we needed to think through the economics. And so what we've decided to do, when we first launched Explorest, the company Patreon was really taking off, which was one of the pioneers in the creator economy. And so in Patreon, somebody who's a fan of a big creator pays like a patronage fee and gets access to XYZ exclusive content, can chat with the creator, etc. For us, we charge our users a subscription fee to enjoy the tips related to content creation. And we share that back to the creatives who contributed their favorite places and all the associated insights. So we've got a creator economy model whereby users subscribe to the app for pro insights, and we share that back to our contributing creatives, and that's how we continue to scale. Now, everything I just shared is on the B2C monetization side. On the B2B side, it's in its early stage, but when we have to think through the pandemic, how does a product like ours survive through the pandemic? It was definitely tough, but it challenged me to really think through monetization. And that's when we started to really think about how do we partner with different brands, whether it's a tourism board or a hotel, to feature them on the Explorest app. And so we're also generating revenue in that capacity as well.
So, Justin, you were telling us about some tips and stuff that these photographers have. Do they create the content? Do you create the content? And how does that all work? And can you give us some examples of some of those tips? Maybe just
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I will say on first impression, you'll be blown away at the level of detail and reliability that our location insight, the information that we have for each place, goes into. So, a location insight has the following. We rate the skill level, give information around its accessibility, the time of day that's best to go for that beautiful picture, opening or closing hours if it's got a venue, tips on what to pack, the exact GPS coordinate that the photographer stood to take the photo, alongside a very detailed description on how to get there. Oftentimes it's not so straightforward, especially if you're kind of climbing a mountain somewhere in California to get, on one particular trail to make a particular turn. Those details can get lost pretty easily. And so we give a lot of added context on how to get to the actual best place on each trail, say, that we're featuring on the product. We pull in a 5-day weather forecast alongside the magic hours. So the best time of the day where there's the blue hour light or the sunrise light or the golden hour light or the sunset light. And then from a content creation standpoint, each of the photographers or travel creators, they've shared their own tips on, when you're at that place, at that destination, how do you actually get the best photo? Should you use a telephoto lens and zoom in? Should you use a wide angle lens so you can feature the surroundings more? All that information is packed in there. And then to kind of top it off, the gear that was used to take the photo. And we even go so deep to share about like the aperture setting, the ISO setting, the f-stop setting, all those things. And many of the locations also feature incredible things to do nearby. So for each place you find on the Explorest app, you'll get all this insight. That's why I love it, especially when I'm traveling to new places that I'm completely unfamiliar with.
So give us one tip for one place.
One tip for one place.
An example, just so people understand what they mean.
Try Taos. Let's talk about Taos, New Mexico. Do you have a tip for there?
Taos. Yes, I was sharing with Traci that I recently bought an acre of land in Taos. But funny enough, we have not yet launched in Taos. So currently we're live in over 20 destinations all over the world, but there are some major gaps here in the United States. And so, we're a venture-based company. We have an active funding round, and we're also evolving the product to allow not just the expert photographers that I've referenced so far, but our user community can soon add and contribute their own location. So since you're over there, Traci, and near Taos, in due course, you'll have to submit some of your own favorite some of your own favorite photos.
That was going to be my next question. Now, you made a big comment here that is, to me, is very big. If your website or your app has great pictures, I've never seen pictures that great. Now, if you start having regular people that don't have, maybe using an iPhone or even less, one of these cameras that you can buy at CVS, all right, the level of that quality of that photo is not going to be as good. So how do you control that from becoming just everything to having good quality pictures if you're going to allow other people like the users to post?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Great question. So it may surprise you, but some of the images you see on Explorest now were actually taken with an iPhone. A good handful of them, in fact. And I think what's beautiful now is there's been so much innovation to the camera phone. Now my iPhone has 3 different lenses, right? And so we're all kind of becoming our own photographer. And the editing apps are getting even more easy to use. So there's definitely this big need, right? Our community wants to share. But you raise an interesting point. I mean, despite having a strong camera on your phone and good editing apps, it is still difficult to take a great composition and to edit it in the right way that really brings the destination to life. And so we always want to be able to protect the curated, featured experience that you can expect now on the Explorest app. But we do want to evolve the product where we're going to have a community feed that shows all the different locations submitted by our community. And the whole goal is to kind of cultivate the community members to become an expert contributor. So the app itself will always have the kind of functionality for you to narrow in on just the curated images that you see now on Explorest, or taking a look at the community photos that were submitted around the same area.
Well, I know Traci had some questions, so go ahead, Trace.
Well, I want to acknowledge first about all of the highlights around the app and how much you've achieved in this window of time. So you're awarded Google Play's Best of 2020 apps, one of just 23 apps, including Zoom and Disney Plus, from a pool of millions. That's quite an accomplishment. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing about that. So, we first launched Explorest in 2017, and we didn't launch on Android till the end of 2020. It was the number one request from our user community was always, we need more locations. But the second most asked request is, when are you coming out on Android? And so it was a long time coming. And, again, I recognize the patience and share my gratitude for all the Android users who weren't able to use Explorest. But yeah, last October is when we launched, and we got selected by the Google Play Store in the winter time frame as one of the best of 2020 apps. And yeah, I mean, it was an absolute honor for that recognition. And it was, of course, helpful too in customer user acquisition, if you will. So press is tricky. I mean, you can get a lot of good exposure, but I'm sure we all know it sometimes doesn't convert at the expectation that you would really want. And it's natural, right? Because the people reading about something, the audience is so vast. But when it came to the App Store feature, I mean, that was super effective at driving acquisition. And I think, a tip, we have not yet been featured on the Apple Store. That's kind of a goal by the end of this year. But the way to get featured in these app stores or the Play Store is to leverage the latest technologies that platforms are offering to their app developers. And that's something that I think resonated with Android, because we're using their latest and greatest functionalities alongside our beautiful app experience. Yeah, we got selected. So that was super, super powerful.
I think you make such a great point about PR, press, and entrepreneurship. And I think when you're starting a business, it's so exciting. You get your first press hit and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. I remember when I launched Producer Podcast, we had the opportunity to do a press tour around international podcasts. And I was so excited because it was all through Canada and the Northeast. And I thought, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the big time for us. And it did give me a lot of brand recognition. But in terms of conversions, that didn't necessarily happen. But it was a really great opportunity to leverage future partnerships, strategic things, and other opportunities. So I think it's good that you bring that up, because not everybody really realizes that at first. They think that because they're in the press that that's going to be like immediate revenue generation. And it's just part of the overall growth phase, I think. So kudos for pointing that out. In regards to partnerships, and it looks like you've really been able to attain some interesting strategic partnerships between Canyon Ranch and Jeep and some other tourism partnerships. Could you talk a little bit about how you were able to secure those partnerships, and what do they mean to you from a financial monetization perspective and marketing perspective?
Sure. No, that's an excellent question. So, as I shared at the top of the call, we've got revenue streams on the business to consumer side and also on the business to business side. And on the B2B side, it's really about building brand partnerships so we can help them feature their product or their destination more prominently on the Explorest app. So to clarify, we're in later stage discussions with Jeep, but we have not yet narrowed in on a deal. But the big idea is to help Jeep, which is an incredible automobile brand, be featured on the Explorest app, because at the end of the day, our community loves to explore and they need a way to get to these great places. So we see that as a very natural fit. And I think that's another important point is when it comes to evaluating partners, we want to make sure that it's a fit for our brand and our community, right? So the other two that you mentioned, so Canyon Ranch, it's an incredible wellness resort. And so we have our first project with them slated for, I think it's November of this year. Super, super stoked. And we'll be sending two of our photographers, both California based actually, to Canyon Ranch to shoot the property. They'll of course do some social media advertising, but then also we'll leverage the images that they produce on the Explorest app. So as a consequence to the project, we'll be able to feature Canyon Ranch also on the Explorest app, which currently they have no presence. So we're basically creating content for the Explorest app. We're helping brands like Canyon Ranch, but at the same time, we're helping our user community discover more great places. Similarly with Visit Qatar, so Qatar Tourism, we've sent now about 11 scheduled content creators already to Qatar to shoot content with a similar structure. So the produced imagery will also be featuring on the Explorest app. I think that the launch of Qatar, which will blow your mind, it's actually an incredibly beautiful country, very small, but packs so much. We'll be launching Qatar on the app later this year, or it may slide into Q1 of next year just because of the pandemic. But the partnerships are super important.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I would imagine that you walk a fairly fine line, coming back to what you were saying about respecting the audience and respecting the brand. So are the advertising and sponsor messages integrated simply because the photography is done at their locations, or are you actually inserting some sort of call to action within the app that gives them a tangible ROI, a link back or something like that? How is that working?
Right. No, that's an excellent question. And so, we of course have data analytics and reporting so we can share about, who's viewing the information. We will also have call to action so they can learn more about, say, Canyon Ranch or Qatar as a destination. We actually have an editorial section in the app too. So different businesses can kind of co-write with us different blog posts about their destination. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of native original content that we create with these different brands. And I also want to mention, these are commercial partnerships, but we also partner with nonprofits like Leave No Trace and the Nature Conservancy. What a very important cornerstone of our business is helping people discover and explore the world, but to do so in a very responsible and conscious way. And so when you open the Explorest app and you try to get the details on exactly where is this location, you'll be met with a list of the 7 Leave No Trace principles before you're given the exact GPS coordinate of where to go. And so, partnerships to us, it transcends just the commercial side, but also in kind of the nonprofit and environmental awareness side as well.
I love it. Will you ultimately, or do you already have the ability to integrate donations in regards to these nonprofit organizations? So I know it seems like a really good brand awareness tool for them, but is there a way to connect your audience in order to contribute to their fundraising?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned. We as a company donate portions of our proceeds to Leave No Trace and the Nature Conservancy each year, and permitting our users to do the same thing is something that we also want to do. And with the whole craze around crypto and the tokenomics, there's even a scenario that I've thought about whereby if we tokenize Explorest, a portion of every transaction can almost be burned to a wallet that helps these nonprofits. So I'm glad you mentioned it, and it is something that we want to make very simple to do within the Explorest experience for our user community in due course.
I think that would be an amazing way, to just have that whole full circle from protecting where you're going, showcasing the beauty, but then also giving your audience an opportunity to give back. Very powerful. So when you mentioned the pandemic, that led me to think about asking around. Seems like an interesting time to launch a travel-focused app when the world was being shut down. So how did that impact your growth, or did it? And what kind of things did you put in place to overcome those challenges?
Yeah. I mean, I will say, as an early stage business in the travel space, 2020, by definition, wouldn't be our best year. But surprisingly, we saw a lot of growth. And I'll tell you why. Local discovery spiked in ways we've never seen. We couldn't go far, and everybody really wanted to reconnect in any way that they could. So instead of thinking about, I'm going to be going across the country or going across the pond, what can I do within 45 minutes for me? What can I do within a few hour drive for me? And that, we saw a lot of usage spike in that regard. But, and this may surprise you, local discovery has always been the primary use case. So if you're based out in California, when you download Explorest for the first time, you'll see a feed of the nearby locations that are standout near you. And that's the first use case. That's the first aha moment. That's the first thing you'll actually do with the product, is go out and discover something awesome that's near you. Now, you may say or think, I know my area. Well, I would challenge you, take a look at the app. When we first launched in Singapore, as I mentioned, I was in Asia. When we first launched in Singapore, we were serving our ads and acquiring the user base in Singapore. And I would say, anecdotally, 50% of the locations that we featured on Explorest, a Singaporean didn't know where that was. And so, to your question, Traci, local discovery and connecting with what's around us was really what helped us grow through the pandemic.
So how many people do you think you're going to have on the platform in a 3 to 5 year period? And obviously this is a guess, but I just want to get an idea where you think the company's going and how you're going to get there.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So, I like to think big, so let's also think long term. 5 years out, Explorest would love to have 50 million users and to have locations across over 100 countries in the world. We want to help people, no matter where they are, discover beauty around them, to rely on Explorest as a product to help them plan wherever they want to go next, with family and friends, or even on a solo trip. And to do that, we really need mass scale of locations. So what unlocks users is to have more locations. Because right now, if you're in New Mexico, in Taos, what we were just talking about, there's no Explorest locations. We don't feature anything in New Mexico at the moment. So there's not much you can do today. But once we scale across New Mexico and a lot of the other places here in the United States, anybody anywhere in the nation can get immediate use out of Explorest. So that's the key, scaling our locations to 100 countries all over the world. And that will yield, with a lot of other different strategies, our acquisition of 50 million users.
Traci, you had a question?
Well, I wanted to ask you, your personal journey as an entrepreneur in scaling this business. Do you have any tips for anyone listening in terms of how did you survive the launch and the lean window, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, I still ask myself today how I'm surviving. So there's a few things I'll share here. First is to lead with your heart. If you think too critically, sometimes you get lost in the detail, but if you can kind of take a step back into your heart and think through what you're trying to build for the world and how that's going to really solve a customer problem, I think that's truly the first step. But the second is really having grit and perseverance. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, and not just with Explorest, but even with the digital bank business that I built prior to that, things really, really hit the fan. And we didn't know how or where we were going to pivot or move to next. So there's something to be said that perseverance is the way. But this is the key. I mean, waking up and still pushing on an idea is super, super important. But at the same time, it's essential to relentlessly listen to the customer that you're serving. So that's something we've done with Explorest. We're always talking to our user community, asking them what they need. And we have a lot of different constituents when you think about it. We also continuously speak to our network of creators who we heavily rely on to keep sharing, their incredible insights. So perseverance is super key. The relentless listening to our customers' needs is critically important. And then I think the other point I'd mention is this recognition that every opportunity is attached to a person. So when hiring a person, thinking through what doors could they unlock for the business, for our user community? When partnering with a creative or photographer, what impact would that have for our business? What impact would that have for other creators that are considering to contribute to the platform? And fundraising, which is also essential for me to grow the business with our team up to 50 million users, is who is that fund or that investor that's going to believe in the vision of Explorest? And so when you think about opportunities being handed to a person, it really kind of puts into perspective what I should or who I should be speaking to next.
We only have about 20 seconds left, so why don't you just tell them about the app, and then we got to cut out.
Sure. So Explorest helps you discover great places all over, and so you can download us app at the App Store or the Play Store. It's free, and hope to see you exploring.
Thank you very much for listening to the Ask Brien Show, KHCS 1220, 98.1 FM. Thank you very much. Have a great week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ask Brien radio show. You can listen to us every Thursday on KTHS AM 1220 and FM 98.1 or via Facebook Live or anytime wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit AskBrien.com to join the conversation and ask us your business questions, and we'll answer them on our next episode. That's AskBrien.com.